Welcome everyone to the clash between R. Pragnananda, who's just entering into the frame, against Abhimanyu Mishra. Well, Pragg is now 20 years old, but at some point he became an IM at the age of 10 years and 10 months. And he held on to that record for quite some time until Abhimanyu Mishra came in and broke through that record at the age of 10 years and 4 months. That's how both Pragg and Abhimanyu are connected to each other in some way. To me, they are the ultimate prodigies in the world of chess. Of course, after that, we've had two more people breaking Abhimanyu's record of youngest IM. We have Faustino Oro first and then Roman Shogziev. There you see Abhimanyu Mishra coming in. But the honor of being the youngest ever grandmaster in chess still is held by this young boy, which is incredible. He achieved it, if I'm not mistaken, at the age of 12 years and 4 months. Just incredible what he has achieved. And there you have Pragg and Abhimanyu shaking hands with each other. Abhimanyu, of course, representing the US flag. And we have a handshake there. Off we go. Pragg takes his time before the first move and opens with the English opening. Pawn to c4 played. And Abhimanyu brings his knight out to f6. And now knight to f3 played. And let's see what Abhimanyu does here. He goes pawn to e6 and he's going to break in the center with d5, but Pragg pushes pawn to b3, opening up his bishop on this long diagonal. Generally you start with the other bishop. He goes b3, pawn to d5 played here, and bishop to b2. Well, Abhimanyu brings his bishop to d6 now. It's interesting how this opening is a little bit similar to Gukesh versus Arjun on the adjoining board. Pawn to g3 now played. And Pragg is going for the double fianchetto here. He goes castles. And Pragg brings his bishop out to g2. And pawn to c5. You generally want to be careful around black pushing the pawn to d4, blocking the bishop. So Pragg takes on d5. You can take with both the pawn and the knight. Wonder what Abhimanyu will do here. Maybe knight takes d5 is not such a bad idea. But he goes pawn takes d5, which is logical, opening up the bishop, getting the knight to c6. It feels like black's position is flowing here, but d4 by Pragg. And that's an important move, because if you castle, then perhaps black can go d4 and block this bishop. So d4. And now knight to c6 played by Abhimanyu. He's attacking the d4 pawn. You can take on c5, but first let's castle it out, says Pragg. He short castles here. And a very useful move, rook e8, placing the rook on the semi-open file on e8. Knight jumps into c3, attacking the pawn on d5 here. And Abhi now thinks a bit and goes knight takes d4. He takes it with his knight. Pragg, of course, has to take back. Knight takes d4, pawn takes d4. And now here's the point. If you take queen takes d4, he wants to go bishop e5 and create pressure down on e2. So that's the reason why knight b5 is the best move here, and Pragg finds it. He plays his knight to b5. Attacking the pawn here and the d4 pawn. Bishop e5, defending the pawn. And now bishop takes d4. He takes, and now knight takes on d4 seems the most logical here. He brings his knight, defends the pawn, rook c1 coming in, queen c2 to b2, rook d1. This looks like a position where white has easy moves, but of course black is very solid. Bishop to g4 is always an irritating move to face. There's pressure on the e2 point. And now Pragg goes pawn to h3. He attacks the bishop on g4, which is putting pressure on e2. And the bishop comes back to d7. And pawn comes up to e3. And Pragg is happy with what he has here. Rook to c8. Maybe now rook c1 makes sense. But instead he goes knight e2, and that's a very interesting maneuver by Pragg. Imagine you go a6, suddenly you have knight f4 with pressure down here, all three pieces. So Abhimanyu decides that this knight has to be pinned. He goes bishop to b5. And rook e1, defending the knight here. And he chops off on e2. Now, this would work beautifully if it were like after rook e2, black would get some very clean equalizer with d4. But that's not the case here. d4 is not in any way possible. In fact, d4, rook d2 is just losing a pawn. So, knight e4 is what Abhimanyu had on his mind, to go to c3 and fork the two white pieces. Taking here de4 would lead to closer to equality, although over there white still could have something. But rook c2, I love this move. I absolutely love this move, because now knight c3 can be safely met with queen d3. So rook c2, queen f6 played. He's looking still at the c3 square, but now you can double down the c file. And he gets it, rook c1. If knight c3 again, you have queen d3. It's just torture there. So Abhimanyu decides to keep the rooks on the board, keeping some pressure down onto the f2 pawn. Pragg says, well, for me it's more important to get the queens off. So he goes bishop, queen f3. He's ready to trade the queens. So queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, attacking here. Rook can now enter on c7. It seems like a one-way traffic here. Abhimanyu in big pressure. King f8, a good move. So that to meet rook c7 with rook e7. Pragg does play rook c7. And now rook to e7, stopping the menace on the 7th rank. Bishop to g4 played, taking control of this important diagonal. Well, he comes back knight d6. And now he takes on e7. Maybe rook d e8 was better right there, but perhaps not. Like now rook c7 check, and suddenly you can't put your rook in the middle anymore. So you have to move your king, king f6. The rook is very active. He's bringing his king in. Step by step, Pragg putting a lot of pressure on Abhimanyu. g6 is the only move, perhaps he finds it. g6 played with the idea of h5 perhaps. He goes h4, making a square for the bishop on h3. And black goes h5, attacking the bishop. The bishop comes back to h3. Maybe the idea is to put some pressure from g2. So king comes up to e5. Now the main plan here is to play f5 and limit this bishop on h3. So Pragg plays f4. A very interesting move. If you go king e4, king e2, and the king can get trapped here. Could get mated. So he quietly goes back to f6. And now Pragg brings his king to e2. Maybe the best move for black now is a5. Not so easy to play such a move. He goes rook e8. But now Pragg has king f3. Pragg is back on the board. 16 minutes for him, 6 minutes for Abhimanyu. King goes to f3. And maybe he wants to play rook e7, offering a trade of rooks. If you take, it's a draw. But what about rook c5? Pragg, of course, has that in mind. He's going there. Yes, rook to c5. Played here, attacking the d5 pawn. There's just no way to defend those pawns. d5 pawn, how do you? He goes d4, he gives up the pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Pragg is now a pawn up with a close to winning advantage. He is feeling confident. He could very well join Maksudlu at the top as the leader. Rook e8. And now rook e5 could be an idea because the c8 square is covered. He goes rook to c7. And rook e7. A rook trade is offered. And I believe Pragg can take it here. It's an important decision. He takes it. King takes 4 minutes left until 3 more moves to make. And f5, an excellent move, keeping his chances alive to break in. King f6. And now a very important move, king f4 for Pragg. The idea behind that is that next move you want to take on g6. And if king g6, you have king e5. And there's no time for black to get in the move f6. He instead takes here. And that's not a great move. And look at Abhimanyu. He's so happy here. He's so happy, and Pragg is shocked. Pragg is completely shocked. Like, why is his opponent so thrilled? King takes g6 taken here. And I think for Abhimanyu, he understands that if he gets this pawn to f6, this is a huge move for him. King f4 and f6. That's some sort of a fortress built here. Wow. Look at this. And I think Pragg might not be the happiest person there, although he still has some chances to play for a win, and that involves him breaking with g4 at the right time. b6 played, you see, taking away the square. It's very important to notice how the knight controls the light squares, the pawns control the dark squares, and together they form a formidable team. And Abhimanyu keeps his king between these 3 squares here. a5. And now b takes a5 would be a losing blunder because of d5, and then the king just enters here. So you need your pawn on b6 to control that square. So king h6, not touching it at all. Bishop f3. King g6. And he goes bishop c6. For Pragg, it feels like he still should have some chances, but it's so tricky now. These fortresses are just insane. King g7. And you can just sense it from Pragg's body language that he's not happy with that decision. Because many times, you know, you may have your chance now in the game to play for a win. But because you have missed that moment where you could have easily won, and that plays on your mind. And that really kind of drops your quality of play. And look at Abhimanyu. He knows that he doesn't have to do anything here. Just has to keep waiting. Bishop a4. Okay. I mean, good or bad, Pragg has to try for this g4 move and try something there. For now, all he doesn't, the thing is knight d6, pawn b6, you don't touch this, and pawn f6. So basically there's only one piece that's moving, that's the king, but it has enough maneuverability. d5, I mean at the right time Pragg has to go basically g4, bishop a4 played, he comes back king g7, bd1 played. Pragg is known as the ultimate grinder in the world of chess, and I'm pretty sure that he would like to go g4 and try for something here. Although the truth be told, let's say something like g4 takes, it's not so trivial, but maybe there are chances, you know, like try to enter here, king g6. Pragg goes king g2 for Abhimanyu. Nothing really changes. He keeps his plan intact, king h6. King h3. King g6. And now look at Abhimanyu's confidence there. Bishop d1. Pragg makes his move, presses the clock, and we have him waiting for Abhimanyu to come back. He comes back to the board and Pragg offers a draw and Abhimanyu accepts it. Pragg didn't even try with this g4 idea, which was his only idea. That's a big surprise to me, why he did not do that. And he asks, instead of, he could have tried for g4 stuff. And you can see there he says you can take, king g4, king h6, bishop c2, king h5, and try for this endgame. And look at that boy's understanding here, and he's showing endgames there. And Pragg is shell shocked here. Pragg is like, yeah, I gets the knight. I think for Pragg, maybe once he missed that moment, he just completely lost the interest perhaps. And I've not seen Pragg like this. He's generally quite into the zone. He is able to recover, but maybe in this game he wasn't. And here I think he's clearly unhappy with his play. We got Abhimanyu on our stream to analyze the position and to get his thoughts. And well, we can say only one thing: the boy just understands chess quite deeply and could very well be one of the best in the world, the absolute best in